Shalom, shalom. The king is coming. All right. Brother Brian, there you go right there. I see you. All right, Brother Brian, I'm going to pull you up here just for a second, but try to maintain radio silence until we give you the proper introduction there, my brother. All right. Glory to the king. All right. Now, there's a lot that's going on in this world, and there's more to it than what meets the eye. I'm going to give you a couple of quotes here, historical references and quotes, before we bring on the subject matter expert here, Brother Brian from down in Texas. CIA Director William Casey, 1981 to Ronald Reagan. I want y'all to listen real close, because you can find this quote directly on the internet. Listen what he says. And I quote, "We know our disinformation program is complete when everything the American public believe is false." I told you, you can't make this stuff up. You can't. You literally can't make this stuff up. They're really toying around with us and playing games. And they got you so much in a bizarre behavior that is deeply and collectively embedded in the subconscious mind of man that not even Yah himself can remove it. And so if truth can't even penetrate and bust through the noggin of yours, then nothing that you're going to hear or nothing we say is going to benefit you whatsoever at all. It just simply can't do it. Because if Yah's not dealing with you, if he's not opening your understanding, we understand. I sit and watch on a daily basis how offended people get when you just tell them the truth. I don't care if it's the Sabbath day. I don't care if it's keeping the commandments. I don't care if you tell them how pagan Christmas and Easter is and you shouldn't make no association with it or something. But you know what's really disturbing? What's really truly disturbing is that we're in this country, and see, when you have this knowledge right here, what it does is it gives you information. It gives you the sight to be able to see, to know what you're up against, and it teaches you how to navigate. It teaches you how to navigate. I believe, because we're going to let Brother Brian determine the direction that we're going in, but I believe that what we're going to do is kind of go over the history and timeline of how we got here and the 14th Amendment. So some of you who wasn't here last week, if he seems a little bit redundant, or a little bit repetitive there, y'all just bear along with us. Bear along with us, because sometimes you've got to go over a lot of things in order to bring up more information for clarity, because you got to be able to connect the dots there. So the history, or what we would say from the very beginning, contracting with the beast, how did we get here? Sad part about it is Brother Brian, the majority of people don't even know that we're here. They are so asleep, and they're so dumb, dormant, docile, demonized, and demoralized that they have no clue that nothing is wrong. Brother Brian, it's Pastor Dowell. You there, my friend?
Yes, sir, I am. Shalom, Pastor Dowell.
Shalom, 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 Brother Brian. Brother Brian, I'll give you the floor. How did we get here?
All right, let's rock and roll. First of all, Hear, O Yisrael, Yahuwah our Elohim, Yahuwah is one. You shall have no other mighty one before my face. I just want to say thank you, Pastor Dowell. It's just an honor and a pleasure to come on. Bless you, Yisrael, all you brothers, sisters, saints. Man, I love you guys. If I could see you and look in your eyes, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Let's see where we're going to start here. So you had a couple good points there, Pastor Dowell. And like I always say, please, as you can see, this is a lot of information. It's not something that you can present in an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. It may take years for some of us to actually really grasp it, but that's okay. I would just say this is let your ears, open your ears, and at times it may get a little wordy, right? Because we're going to get into the history and the wording of how this thing took place. Because in my humble opinion, if you if you don't understand where we came from, you're doomed to repeat it, right? That's the famous saying. We've all heard that. If we do not understand what happened to us as a people, we're going to be doomed to go right back to it. But this time it's not going to be the same, because the King's coming, and we are going to be wide awake and ready. So we had a first discussion 2 Shabbats ago, or actually, 2 Shabbats ago. Pastor Dowell, it's a pleasure to see you in Houston and all those saints down there. Brother Greg, thank you so much for opening up your house and showing the love and affection that you always do. And Elder Mitchell, is fantastic to see you. Brother Kabir, Brother Leslie, man, I love you, man. Okay, so the first discussion we had was after I listened to it and went back, and even my wife and I talked about it. I was like, wow, man, that was like a data dump, and this can be overwhelming because, you know, to the untrained mind, just like hearing a lot of things, we've been tricked, brothers and sisters. We've been deceived by the Roman cult religion, masquerading as America, the United States, the state that you live in, the municipal, the city that you live in, these all caps fictitious corporations. We've been duped to think that we the people have any power. We actually have none. We have zero. But have hope, because at the end of this deal, as Pastor Dowell and I work through this, there's going to be a format here where we're going to lay out a lot of information, and Pastor Dowell's looking at it. You know what I'm talking about. There's certain discussions we're going to lay out, and we've got to take one each separately and break it down, because otherwise this whole thing will be a bunch of gobbledygook. Some guy just sitting there talking and spitting out way too much information. And as Pastor Dowell put it, put a defibrillator on your mind, and just take it slow. And the good thing about this, and the blessing to the Most High Yah, because this is His hand at work, period. It's not me, it's not nobody else. This is His hand at work. And there's a time, He said, all things would become known at the end days. And part of this battle is us as Hebrew Israelites starting to realize and arm ourselves with not only our spiritual armor, but also our conceptual, our information, our knowledge base, so that and I'm gonna bring in a couple scriptures here, but I'll go back to 2 really quick, in Luke 12:11 and Luke 12:12. And in no way, as I mentioned in the first one, am I mentioning in any way that we're going to get ahead of the Most High giving us this Kodesh tongue and knowing how to speak. But they are going to drag us into synagogues. They're going to drag us into courts, as myself and some of my brothers have already experienced. They're going to arrest us. They're going to pull us over. They're going to confront us, okay? Pastor Dowell knows this better than anybody. But this is part of us building our knowledge base so that we understand what the trap is and what the secret hidden Latin language is. Because remember, we are speaking a perverted tongue called English that came from the Latin, that came from a Greek language and a cult religion that worshiped the pantheon. So not anyone on this call would agree that sick, perverted tongue of Latin is our Kodesh tongue. Because when the Messiah and our Master returns, He's going to give us new bodies and new tongues. And we're going to speak in a new tongue, which just gives me chills thinking about it. Okay, so this is going to be deep, and I'll say this. I'll preface this. This is number 2 of the blog talk with Pastor Dowell on contracting with the beast. Specifically, the first call was the 30-foot view. There was a lot of information. We're going to pan down in this one to the history, and specifically, how did we get here to this point that we're in right now, listening in. We're contracted. We've all got, Pastor Dowell's mentioned, and bless the children that are on the land that don't have these contracts, such as the birth certificate. But the majority of us were all born into this, and we're behind the 8 ball per se, and we've got to We've got to come to the knowledge and understanding and be humble about it. And at the end of this, my point is, there is a great message. The last recording is going to be off the chain because it's going to be the remedy. It's going to be, how do we come out of this? Because this bastard, this mamzer, this son of a you-know-what, tricked us all and deceived. Actually, our parents and our parents are suffering the curses, but we are I would say we're probably one of the first generations, first or second, to start coming out of this. And just like he said, his children would be in a foreign land, speaking a foreign tongue, worshiping a foreign deity of stone and wood. Correct? Hallelujah. Okay, so I'm gonna like I did in the first one. I would just want to go through 2 or 3 scriptures that kind of put things into context here, because it's very important that we understand who we are and how we are to handle ourselves as we build this knowledge base in dealing with the beast system, because that's exactly what we're in. We are in a Roman colony under a fictitious name in all caps called America, the state you live in. It doesn't matter. It matters not. We are a Roman colony under Admiralty law, the Roman law of the sea, and specifically it was perfected by Justinian, one of the early Roman emperors, but I'll get into that in detail. So I want to first start at Exodus 23:32. Thou shalt make no covenant with them, nor with their gods. And I looked up, once again, always love going back and looking up these words, because it just brings so much forth every time you meditate on them. The word, let's see, in Hebrew 1285, the origin, or 1262, in the sense of cutting, a compact, because made by passing between pieces of flesh. Confederacy, now there's an interesting one, confederacy, right? They've told us we are a Confederate Republic of States. Confederate covenant league, covenant, alliance, pledge between men, treaty, alliance, league, man to man. Constitution, there's another glaring one, right? We're under this thing called the Constitution, but yet the Hebrew Concordance says that this thing is basically a covenant, an ordinance, monarch to subjects. Okay, at the end of Exodus 23:32, it ends with gods, or mighty ones, tyrants. So the Hebrew 4:30, gods in the ordinary sense, but specifically used in the plural, thus especially with the article of the supreme God, occasionally played by way of deference to magistrates. There's a key, magistrates. So they're judges, folks. Those are judges in these Admiralty Roman law of sea courts. Make no covenant with these judges, and sometimes superlatives, etc. Down below that, another specific point is rulers and judges. So at the end of Exodus 23:32, there's a little deeper definition of the Hebrew word of gods, meaning mighty ones, tyrants, etc. Not only their pagan deities, the pantheon, but the tyrants that walked and ruled over our early ancestors. Okay, so let's go on to another two quick, well, actually a couple ones. Revelation 18:13. And now this is special because this is when Babylon falls. And you can see this ties into the 14th Amendment, which is how they've enslaved all of us through a new status. And they tricked us through this thing called slavery in the Civil War. And they played on it at the tail end of it and said it was about slavery, but it actually had nothing to do with it early on. It was about the northern states pilfering the southern rich states and putting in a fiat currency. And they wanted the wealth of those southern states. Not in any way am I downgrading slavery, because that in all ways will be revealed. We'll get to that in much greater detail. So Revelation 18:13, and cinnamon and odors and ointments and frankincense and wine and oil and fine flour, Pastor Dowell, and wine. So you take a little sip there. And fine flour and wheat and beasts and sheep and horses and chariots. Here we go. And slaves and souls of men. Okay? So they are the merchants of this world that were given dominion for a short time are trading in what? All these material goods, but most importantly, the last two words, slaves and souls of men. Hosea 4:6. Man, hallelujah. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Because thou hast rejected knowledge, I will also reject thee. And thou shalt be no priest to me, seeing thou hast forgotten the law of thy Yah. I will also forget thy children. Let's take that to Hebrews 18:20. And I'll bring this up every time because this one really hits home. It's a primitive root, and this is key, to dumb down or be silent. Not only to destroy, to perish, right? To cut down, silence, undo, probably kill, but to be dumb or silent, meaning because of the lack of knowledge, we don't see what's happening to us. And that's exactly what they've done through a colloquial language called English, which is a perverted form of the pagan language Latin. Okay? We covered Luke. Let me go to the last one, is Second Thessalonians 2:10. And with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they received not the love of the truth, that they might be saved. 2:11, and for this cause Yah shall send them strong delusion, that they should believe a lie. So we're either going to believe it, and everyone on this call believes it. We hear it. And we got a good shepherd here to lead us, right? A Jeremiah shepherd. So let's get into this. We're gonna dive now into the 14th Amendment. Actually, let me backtrack just for a second, because I'll put this into perspective so that anybody listening can understand kind of what we've covered and what's next, because they're going to be broken down in categories, specific categories, so that you can absorb and get all the most information you can in a specific amount of time. We're going to do the history as of tonight, another one potentially on the birth certificate, another one on contracts, covering the passport, driver's license, social security, marriage license, title, meaning title to all of your things that you think you own, your auto, home, trailers, motorcycles, boats, whatever, okay? Another one that I think is very well will blow the doors off is something that I've recently become aware of, and it's called the Justinian Deception in Dog Latin. I mentioned it in the first call, but this is going to expose this pagan language that I'm speaking right now, and that we have been brought up since we were babies to speak, called English, a perverted form of Latin. So Katie barred the door on that one. And then the last one, hopefully the remedy, and we'll begin to expose, and hopefully with some other brothers that are in this know that have tried and true, tested, and put some good things into practice so that we can actually start to reverse these contracts. Okay, let's get to the 14th Amendment. Okay, this may come as a surprise to most of you. You may be offended, and that's great, because I hope you are. I think the more offended you are, the more you're going to be interested to find the truth. The 14th Amendment was not at all what you think it was. It did not free my brothers and sisters that have a different, darker hue of skin. We think it did conceptually, but it actually didn't. All it did was take roughly 3 million, I think the numbers are probably higher than that, 4.5, it may be way more than that. I can tell you right now, roughly probably 100 million died just coming over here on the ships through the transatlantic slave trade. So these numbers, don't quote me, I'm just saying that this is all information that I can humbly pull from the internet. I'm not the source. If I am rebuked, rebuke me, but I'm just going to present information in hopefully the best way possible. The 14th Amendment was a fraud. It was set up to deceive and to make cover for the Rothschilds and the Jewish banking cartel that pretty much owned this country from the inception. Okay? So, when the 14th Amendment was put through, there was roughly, let's call it 4.5 million black slaves were granted citizenship into this United States. And when I say United States, it's specifically in the reference, and we're going to discuss two terms, and hear me out. There is a legal term and a lawful term, and words you're going to hear me say, and until you can visualize these and see them with your own eyes and do this research, but at some point, Pastor Dowell and I will post a lot of this information in some form, Google Docs or whatever, so that you can start to see the difference. Because, right, we learn from hearing and we learn from sight, and most of the stuff that you're going to read over hearing it from my voice, it's not going to register because you can't see the difference in the written text. And I just want to make that very, very clear. So when the 14th Amendment went through, it granted citizenship to the United States, which is a corporation at that time. Okay, this thing took place. It was adopted on 7/9/1868. This is far after the original United States of America had been bankrupted, had been sold off to European families, and I'll get into that. Okay, so this thing created two second-class status of citizens, okay? The 14th Amendment created two distinct types of status, and this is even in their own documents. You can check it in the DS-11 form, which is the passport application. We'll post a link to that at a later time. It created the citizen, the U.S. citizen, capital U, capital S, lowercase citizen, and it hid the American national, or what is called the state citizen. So prior to the 14th Amendment, you had a nation that had a large population of black slaves that were brought here through the transatlantic slave trade, and you had a lot of white people that owned land and had specific rights that were granted to them, inalienable rights that were granted to them from the original Constitution. That's what the 14th Amendment did. It ended the chattel slavery, right? It ended the plantation era and created a new corporate serf status of feudal slavery, basically federal employees. So instead of doing away with slavery, they just created a hybrid, a crypto new form of slavery, and took it underground and hid it by dog Latin, this hidden form of English and Latin. To see, we don't speak Latin. They took it out in the early 60s, 40s, 50s, from what I can tell. So they put us all into a new status called U.S. citizen, right? We've all been pulled over. We've all paid tickets. We've all been done this, that, and the other. And we claim, are you an American? Are you a U.S. citizen? And most everybody would say, of course I am. Yes, I am. Of course I'm a U.S. citizen. Bingo. You don't even realize that you just verbally, through the power of your tongue, gave birth to this fictitious entity, this thing called the straw man, which we'll get into detail, this fictitious jurisdictional entity. Okay? So what they did, they took the entire continent of people and they put everybody into a new status and created a fictional dead corporation, right? A new status with civil rights without inalienable rights that are given to us by our Creator, okay? So civil rights, research this, the word civil. They are privileges to be taxed, fined, revoked, abused. They are not inalienable nor protected by our organic Constitution of 1776. They're basically debased dog Latin, which changes the grammar from English versus Latin. And I'll just say this will be a dovetail into the teaching we do on dog Latin. They have taken a language, and in any contract which you sign, when you do an application, there's stuff in all caps and lowercase. And that right there is prima facie evidence of fraud, because you cannot take an alien language of Latin and put it into an English document. The two don't mix, right? They're two separate deals, and that in and of itself is fraud. Okay? So let's make sure we understand this. The 14th Amendment is not the end all, okay? A lot of people and a lot of people in the patriot community are going to say the 14th Amendment is what did it all, etc. Okay, the only thing it is a mechanism to hide the status of the hidden sovereign American national. Okay, which is the original state citizen, and this goes way deeper, brothers and sisters. This is not about America. This is not about I'm a Texan, I'm a Louisiana, I'm a Tennessean. This goes way back to Rome. And this is the beast that received a head wound but did not die, right? He just went crypto. He went underground, and it was perfected by Justinian, the emperor of Rome, in about 527 AD. He reigned from roughly 527 AD to 565 AD. So the Justinian principle of corporate dead governance of the dumbed-down, distracted masses is what we're going to get into. So I've got a little thing I want to probably bring some humor to you here. So in ancient Rome, and this exactly mirrors this nation that we live in today called America, to the T. Okay, they've given us all these distractions, right? Justinian's doctrine and his principle was to dumb people down and give them so many distractions that they would not see what was going on right in front of their face. So what do we see today? We see the NFL, we see hockey, we see the UFC, which is like brutal, literally barbarian bashing each other, till they're bleeding all over the place. Horse racing. The Roman Colosseum was based on blood sports. Okay, these were tools that were implemented through Rome and actually through all this vast empire to pacify and to keep people occupied, dumb, just busy, right? If you got so many things of entertainment, no different than today, right? Monday Night Football, Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday, Sunday. I don't even want to say those names. God forgive me, but you know what I'm getting at. So the Roman Colosseum was basically this early form of blood sport. They would just literally execute people, and primarily they throw a lot of Hebrews in there, right? That was their favorite thing of choice. They'd throw a lot of warriors in there that they knew were warriors, and they let the lions eat them. This was an example to intimidate the people, right? And just as you see on the news today, you see cops intimidating people and shooting people and other things where they're trying to condition us so that we don't wake up and play whack-a-mole, right? They don't want us waking up en masse because they know the minute we do, it's game over. You can look at Hollywood, the entertainment industry, the music industry, which is straight up Luciferian. This is the MK Ultra of mind stuff that they pollute our minds with and keep us pacified. Here's another good one. The Colosseum was home to various gladiatorial battles, fights between men and wild animals. It could seat roughly 45,000 spectators. And the crowd often decided the fate of the loser in a battle. Literally, Caesar would turn his thumb up or down, and the masses would like in Jolly say kill him and put their thumbs down, just reveling in murder. This is a good one. Circus Maximus was another public entertainment center where chariot races were held. A great reproduction of the Circus Maximus is in one of the films, Ben-Hur. We've all probably seen that. But listen to this. The circus was specific to Rome, but it could hold roughly 250,000 people. Think of that. Back then, that's huge. Think of the architecture and the manpower that it took to build that stadium. Okay, so all roads run to that. Now, this is key. The word church, Greek word circe, means seance, sorcery, or circus, right? So these churches, these Babylonian whore buildings with the steeples and all the pagan symbolism, they're basically named after a Greek deity. Another good one, campus, right? We've all been on schools. We've been indoctrinated in schools. We went to college. I went to college. Doesn't matter if we did or not. Doesn't matter shit. But even the word campus comes from basically an old battlefield that was converted into literally watching actually a bunch of homosexual Edomites run around, get sweaty, and then after that they'd go into the Roman bathhouse and, do whatever they did with each other. It was a Roman cult religion based on homosexuality and straight up paganism. Okay, so let's get back into the 14th Amendment, and I mentioned Justinian. Okay, so this is where, as we go through these lessons, it's going to make sense on what we call the straw man, the all caps name, which is, at the end of this, is how are we going to start to come out of this as a people? Because we all have that name on our birth certificate, if you have one, your license, your Social Security, every single piece of mail you get, it's in a variation of an all caps name. That's a corporate, dead, fictitious entity. So two names were created. One is the birth name, being the first and the middle name. That's your actually, some would call it your Christian name. Obviously, we're not going to use that term, but just bear with me in these terms. The other one is the full name, meaning the surname containing your first, middle, and last. These were created in 1230 AD by the Hohenstaufen Empire of Rome, which was a family reign that reigned roughly 1100 to about 1200 AD. Roughly, they were in power roughly 100 years, and they created this thing called, or actually they perfected the Corpus Juris. The Corpus Juris was created by Justinian, one of the earlier Roman emperors, in 530 to 560, and it was perfected in 1230, just after the Magna Carta, and it was done specifically to counteract what was called the true common law. And this true common law was spreading because these people witnessed the Messiah, Yahushua HaMashiach, and they realized that there was truth, and it was spreading like wildfire, and people wanted a just system. They wanted truth, and this belief in the Messiah was spreading. So in order to expand Rome's rule, Justinian created basically what is called the Justinian deception to continue the private contracts of Rome inside the Corpus Juris, or law of the water, law of the sea, which is the Holy See. We'll get to that later, but these are terms that have direct effect on the laws that you and I think today that we have that protect us, because we don't have any laws that protect us. It's just a facade of a fictitious corporation that's operating and masquerading as if they are appointed by the people, but they're actually a Roman corporation called Unidroid. Okay? The United States is owned lock, stock, and barrel by Rome. Okay? Rome is the beast. Look up the word fiduciary. Okay? That means almost like a steward, right? Somebody taking care of something. Via the fiduciary of Rome and the Pope, which was an Edomite, right? King Harold was an Edomite, and within a couple hundred years, the Edomites spread and basically took over. They are the seat of the adversary, called Jews. I call them Genos, capital J-I-N-O, Jews in name only, spoken of in Revelation 2:9 and 3:9. These mamzers, these deceivers, these sons of the adversary created this thing called the Sesquibi Trust, which is the straw man. It is your all caps name. It is the fictitious dead entity that you thought was you all these years, but was done by fraud without your consent and informed consent. Okay? It's called trust law. Trust law is basically Roman admiralty law, or law of the sea. Okay, there's 5 families. Let's get an idea of who is behind this. Okay? And I take absolute joy in calling out these you-know-whats. There's 5 families: the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, the Morgans, DuPonts, and you-know-who, the Bush. That American royalty family that we all thought, stood on the rubble of 9/11 and basically had fake crocodile tears. There are 13 families that make up this basically New World Order, Luciferian group of fiduciaries. These are the ones that control the banks, the nation states, the territories, the corporations, and they have all of our likeness in a bank vault, and they control and own the deed to you and I, unless you don't have one. But have hope, because we're going to unwind all this stuff. The 13 families, and there's a couple run over here. There's the Astor, Bundy, Collins, DuPont, Freeman, Kennedy, Lai, Onassis, Rockefeller, Russell, Van Dyne, Merovingian, we've all heard that, Merovingian, and of course the Rothschilds. Okay, these are the fiduciaries of the Roman Pope. These are the whores that were granted authority and power by the beast so that they could run and operate and control. And at the end of Revelation, right, the last of Revelation, trade in the souls, the slaves, and the souls of men. Those are them by name. Okay? All right, so let's get back to the 14th Amendment. It was not legally ratified by 3/4 of the states of the Union as required by the Constitution itself. The so-called 14th Amendment was dubiously proclaimed by the Secretary of State William Seward on 6/20/1868. The President shared that doubt. There were 37 states in the Union at that time, so ratification by at least 28 was necessary to make the amendment an integral part of the Constitution. Actually, only 21 states legally ratified it, so it failed ratification, plain and simple, right? If you don't have the 2/3, nothing can pass. But just like the Federal Reserve Act and all these other things that are done by color of night, right? They'll call the House, they'll send everybody home, and they'll have just their key little, basically stooges or paid agents there to go in, walk in, and place a vote. So it actually never passed, but it doesn't really matter. It's neither here nor there, okay? The reality is the plantation system of slavery technically ended, but it actually didn't because of the Jim Crow laws and all the other things that took place, right? They were literally slaughtering and running around a bunch of racist people in the South called the KKK, running around on horses, terrorizing, right, for years. So nothing really changed. They basically started to rebuild the broken down corporation that had been put into debt. Okay? So I want to go in and I want to read I'm going to read from the 14th Amendment, and we're going to get into the definition of words, because the definition of words is very important, we as a people to understand, so that when somebody calls you a person, a human, right, a natural person, all these, a resident, a driver, whatever the term is, we all need to be able to understand and go and find out where does this word originate and how does it apply to me. So the opening sentence of the 14th Amendment, which is basically a trick of words, wordplay, or what I call legalese, and here's a big clue. It's called specialized. Legalese is specialized language of the legal profession. So if it's specialized in the legal profession, that word legal is a hidden term. Okay, it's a corporate term. It's not lawful, it's legal. Lawful means under common law that it's transparent, right? That we can have real justice and a process under due process to defend ourselves. Legal, we can't. That takes it into their corporate, basically star chamber, fictitious courts. So the 14th Amendment, I'm going to read it. The first section of the 14th Amendment. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States. Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. Man, that sounds great, doesn't it? I mean, it really does. Boy, hallelujah. That sounds like we are saved, we are set free. All of my brothers and sisters that were brought here through the transatlantic slave trade, man, those days are over. I think not. So let's go into the Black Law Dictionary and let's break down these terms, because this is where the this is where the trick is, brothers and sisters. This is where the trick is. It's called Latin, hidden Latin, dog Latin, in a perverted language called English, right? It's not the Kodesh Hebrew tongue. We're not speaking Kodesh Hebrew. We're speaking the language of Rome. And we were not taught these multiple deep layers of Latin, right? They took it out of our school system on purpose so that we would be dumbed down and made to be deaf. What was that first scripture I read? Hosea 4:6. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Destroyed, the Hebrew 18:20, right? To be dumb or silent. Okay, so I'm going to go through these, and this is where it's going to get a little wordy, and then there's going to be a timeline too. So just bear with me, and hallelujah for the recording, because you'll want to go back and pick these apart. Person. Okay, so the very first sentence, all persons born or naturalized in the United States. Let's start with that. Persons. There's your first clue. Person. The Revised Code of Washington, I won't even quote all the court cases and dates, defines a person as follows. The term person may be construed to include the United States, this state, or any state or territory, or any public or private corporation, as well as individual. There you go. You're one and the same. You're a corporation, a dead entity. Person, Black's Law Dictionary, 6th edition, page 791, defines person as follows. In general usage, a human being, i.e. natural person, though by statute, term may include labor organizations, partnerships, associations, corporations, legal representatives, trustees in bankruptcies, or receivers. Once again, corporation, right? Fictitious dead entity. Person, Oran's Dictionary of Law, 1999. A human being or a natural person, right? We all think we're natural persons, right? If someone said, yeah, you're a natural person, right? You'd say, oh, of course I'm a natural person. But see, we don't realize, guys, Yahuwah the Most High defined me as one thing, man. And he defined my partner as woe man, period. No ifs, ands, buts, right? Any other description is fraud. But they've indoctrinated us with all these legalese terms, so we think, oh yeah, I'm a person, I'm a resident, I'm a citizen, I'm all this stuff. We're going to break this down so the words will become obvious. Person, according to Oran's Dictionary of Law, a human being, a natural person, a corporation, an artificial person. Corporations are treated as persons in many legal situations. Also, the word person includes corporations in most definitions in this dictionary. Any other being entitled to sue as a legal entity, right? To sue. A government, an association, group of trustees. The plural of persons is persons, not people. Okay, here's another good one. Duhig's Law Dictionary, an entity, a person. An entity with legal rights in existence, including the ability to sue and be sued, to sign contracts, to receive gifts, to appear in court, either by themselves or by lawyer, and generally other powers incidental to the full expression of the entity of law. Individuals are persons in law unless they are minors or under some kind of incapacity, such as a court finding, etc. Many laws give certain powers to persons, which in almost all instances include business organizations that have been formally registered, such as partnerships, corporations, or associations. Can I make it any more clear? When they say person, when you sign that I-9, when you sign that driver's license, when you sign that application, and right where the signature line, it says person in little tiny print that you can't even see, bam, they got you. You just consorted with the beast, you contracted, and you gave your consent. Person, Webster's 1828 dictionary defines person as Latin. Okay, this will blow your mind right here. Now we're going to get to the Latin, the real definition of person. Webster's 1828 dictionary defines person as, quote, Latin persona, said to be compounded of per, through or by, and sonus, sound, a Latin word signifying primarily a mask used by actors on the stage. You can't make this up, Pastor Dowell.
You're
Latin
right.
Word signifying primarily a mask used by actors on the stage. Please go ahead.
No, you're right. I'm listening. Keep going. By all means, you're right. They're doing nothing but just stage playing. They're just putting on a show.
Exactly. A mask on stage. Ugh, gives me creeps. Okay, then there's a legal person, And I've got a lot here, so I don't know if I'll track down through all the definitions, but I do want to get to a few, because there's going to be a timeline I want to go into, because I think that's key to understanding the gist of today's conversation and discussion is, how did we get to this point? Okay? How, in all this information, what is the timeline so that we can understand in a 30-foot view of like, okay, I see all these things that happened throughout this history of this country that I thought I was a part of and that had my back. How did I get to this point? Natural, untouched. Okay, this is a good one. Actually, I'll go back up. Individual, Black's Law's Dictionary, 6th edition, page 533, defines individual, a noun. This term denotes a single person, remember, person, we've already defined what person is. So now individual is also defined as a person, meaning also a dead corporate entity. See, they've tricked us into all these definitions. It's layer upon layer upon layer. As distinguished from a group or class, and also very commonly a private or natural person, as distinguished from a partnership, corporation, or association. But it is said that this restrictive signification is not necessarily inherent in the word, and that it may, in proper cases, include artificial persons. Okay? There you go. Individual is defined. We've defined person. Okay? This is Black's Law's Dictionary. This is their code that they have to go by. Okay? So I'm not a person. I'm not an individual. I'm actually not a human being, because all these terms, I'm not a natural person. All these terms are tricks. They're tricks by this Luciferian language that we've been taught to get us to consent and to agree to contract, because that's the only power they have over us, brothers and sisters. The only thing is by contract. Okay, so let's look at natural, because I'm a natural person, right? You think, of course I'm a natural person. All right, Black's Law Dictionary, 6th edition, page 712. Natural. This is even more bizarre. This is where it gets into some racist stuff. So, untouched by man or by influences of civilization, wild, untutored, and is the opposite of the word artificial. The juristic meaning of this term does not differ from the vernacular, except in the cases where it is used in opposition to the term legal. And then it means proceeding from or determined by physical causes or conditions, as distinguished from positive enactments of law or attributable to the nature of man rather than the commands of law, or based on...
Uh-oh. What in the world happened to my brother?
Did we get cut off?
Okay, yeah, just for a second. You're back, my brother. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so one last one, human. Webster's 1888 dictionary defines human, because, see, we all think we're humans, right? Of course I'm a human being. No, I'm not. I'm a man, created in the image of the Most High Yah. A human being, one of the race of man, rare and inelegant, sprung of humans that inhabit earth. Right? So listen to the etymology of the word human. It suggests that it is a marriage of two separate words. Hue, defined as the property of color, and man, right? Hue, man. But this cannot, of course, be correct, at least not politically. So so I can't go there, which is kind of a joke, because the word would then mean colored man, right? So if hue man has color in the front of it, being hue, that would mean a colored man. You know they don't like that. Okay, so moving on here, there's a few other, let's see, man. 1888 dictionary, Webster's dictionary, an individual of the human race, a human being, a person. So see how they tie in man to now be called a person, okay? Caucasian, here's another one, and I'm going to get to the clue here. Once again, one of my primary messages and what brought me to Pastor Dowell is the study of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So Caucasian, Black's Black's Law Dictionary, 6th edition. Caucasian as follows: of or pertaining to the white race. Let's see here. Definite older blacks, if anything. Okay, Caucasian, 4th edition, Black's Law Dictionary. Caucasian as follows: pertaining to the white race to which belong the greater part of European nations and those of Western Asia. Okay, so the Webster's 1888 dictionary says anyone belonging to the Indo-European race and the white races originating near Mount Caucasus. Oh yeah, Kendall Jackson, baby. Actually, let me take a Pastor, jump in real quick. I'm gonna have a sip of my wine too.
All right, yeah. I hope that each and every last one of you enjoying the information that is actually coming down the pike right now. Is just like the way we do in the ministry. The reason why so many people are done down to an unprecedented level, especially in religion, quote unquote, the most satanic religion that there is in the world has ever hit mankind, Christianity, is that these people expect for you to just believe what they say, but they don't never, ever, ever expect for you to actually go behind them and look and study the words that are being presented to you, or what they say and what their definition is. You know, they have learned the difference between eisegesis and exegesis, which is the proper methods and modes of interpretation. Most people don't even comprehend what one or the other is and could care less. That's because we've been so mesmerized and been duped and deceived to such a level that we think that the way we actually process thought and the way that we define words and terms without even knowing the etymology of them, we are right in our own eyes, just like what the book says. So when you see me on Shabbat, you know, going behind the words that are presented to us in English or this dog Latin that I just recently learned, we're getting to the nitty gritty. We're getting down to what they really truly intended. And that's the reason why that the Bible is a closed book. And you can't really truly begin to open it up and comprehend and understand what's in front of us, just like the code says. Faith comes by hearing. Hearing comes by the word of Yah. And how can he hear without a preacher? And how can he preach unless he is sent? And I'm going to say this. If someone claims to be a minister of Yahweh, Yahuwah, he must possess exactly the power that the prophets, the Messiah, and the apostles. Now, he may not have it all, but he must possess some type of power to confirm the word with signs following. Does that mean that he's going to be successful in every single thing? No, even the apostles wasn't even successful in all healings. That's easy to see. We can find that. But there are a lot of things that the men of God should possess to confirm the word. And we have people out here that's toying around, playing around with your soul, playing mental gymnastics with you. And they have got you in such a way that when they sent you to these public food systems, I don't call them public school, I call them the public food systems, because you got to be a fool to believe the mess that they have put inside of your head. Listen, higher education, higher learning. You know, Brother Brian, Brother Brian, the guest that is here on the show tonight, he went to the University of Texas. As a matter of fact, Brother Brian used to play, I think, either free safety or strong safety for the Texas Longhorns. And the man is an intelligent man. I just met his wife this weekend, a very intelligent woman, beautiful family. And it does my heart good to see that people are not dumb on purpose. Yeah, I did. I made a statement. It does my heart good to see that people are not dumb on purpose, that they're using the intelligence that the Most High Yah has given them to be able to discern good and evil, right and wrong. Now, I understand that even though Brother Brian is bringing out a lot of information right here, you need to have this. Just like you need to have the truth of Yah's word, because it didn't say jump out. It said come out. It's going to take a little bit by little bit of you doing your own due diligence, your own independent research. Because remember, think about it. You don't believe nothing until you experience it yourself. That's just a fact. You just truly don't believe it until you experience it yourself. Very few of us have that spirit of truth where we can actually be led by the Spirit. Most of us are hard-headed, and we actually got to get a couple of lumps upside our head before we can actually get it. Hey, that's just the way it is. Brother Brian, go ahead and continue.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Pastor Dowell. Thank you for the kind words. It is an honor. Like I said initially, it's an honor, and it's not about me. I know that he woke me up 10 years ago and 7 years ago into this, and I know that he put this in front of me for one thing, so that I could bring this forth, and it is beyond obvious. And I just once again I thank you and just praise Israel. Okay, so let's get back into the definitions now. Pastor Dowell, where are we tracking on time? Because like I said, this could go on very long. You just tell me where, but there's a timeline I want to get into with dates, and that'll or just let me know. So I'm going to get back in here to the. There's a couple words, and I'm not going to read all these because I think you should probably do some due diligence at some point. Pastor Dowell, I think it'd be very helpful, and as we start to roll this out and to educate in Google Docs and other things where anybody listening can go back and view this exact outline, format, etc., or notes, words, whatever. We'll figure it out, but you can look up on the internet. You can look up Black's Law Dictionary, right? The first through the fourth editions, primarily the fourth and the sixth editions. You'll find all these terms in there. But you can look up born. Oh, here's a good one. Born out of wedlock. Now this has something to do with the birth certificate. Now when we do a specific message on that, we're going to show you exactly how they classified all of us as bastard children, basically as
mamzers,
as wards of the state. Because yes, mamzers, hallelujah, yes sir, and they did it just by tricks, right? And we didn't know, but that's okay, right? That's all right. But born out of wedlock, just listen to this legalese here. Children whose parents are not and have not been married to each other regardless of marital status of either parent with respect to another. Right? So not only said have not been married to each other regardless of marital status of either parent regardless of respect to another. So they're going to tell you you're born out of wedlock just by that ruling. Okay, so all these court cases are put in place by design so that they can put all these little traps in. Okay, naturalization, I'm not going to read all these because I do want to get into this timeline, but naturalization. United States, here's a key one, brothers and sisters. United States, right? We all think we live in the good old United States of America, right? I thought I did, but I didn't realize that according to a real patriot, James Traficant, who was either a senator or a House representative, which they did poison and kill. They first they put him in prison when he went on the House of the Senate floor and declared and started speaking truth. Then they basically black masked him at his house, hogtied him, and then killed him. So Jimmy Traficant, you can look it up, you can YouTube it on the House of the Senate floor. Quote: The United States Congressional Record, March 17th, 1993, Volume 33, page H-1303. Speaker Rep. James Traficant, Jr. from Ohio, addressing the House. Quote, Mr. Speaker, we are here now in Chapter 11. That's bankruptcy, folks. Okay, Chapter 11 is bankruptcy. This thing was bankrupt in 1933. Members of Congress are official trustees presiding over the greatest reorganization of any bankrupt entity in world history. The U.S., the U.S. in all caps, government, we are setting forth a blueprint for our future. There are some who say it is a coroner's report that will lead to our demise. It is established. basically saying it was dead. Okay, so what they did, James Traficant was an early patriot that was awoken. Don't know where he stood spiritually with the Most High Yah. That's up to Yah, but he stood up, heard the truth, and exposed it, and then they murdered him. But he called it out, and there's so much evidence. Okay, so let's get into this. I'll give you another piece of evidence. This is by Judge Dale, who is a retired judge. Corporations are privately owned businesses, meaning that the corporate United States belongs to one or more private individuals, which is always governed by a board of directors. I'm not even going to read, well, actually I am. The corporate United States is privately owned by a group of European royal and elite individuals tied to the Federal Reserve System, and the letters of incorporation are recorded in the Vatican. The President of the United States is actually the CEO of the United States Corporation and the Congress Corporation and all other corporate employees. Everything they do is in the interest of the corporate owners. And then he states, I can't access these documents because it's marked national security private.
Hey, Brother Brian, you got 5 minutes, my brother, on tonight's broadcast. 5 minutes.
Okay, so Pastor Dowell, I won't get into the timeline. I'll keep that for another time because I do want to cover it, so whatever, we'll just fit it in. But there's at least a good, I'm going to say a good 35 minutes in there, but it has dates and specific things that have taken place. And I think in the context of this conversation, it's very important that our brothers and sisters can listen to this and then go search these dates and verify specific things that have taken place so that they can basically do their due diligence and in their own house and their own time and their own privacy prove all things. Because, like I said, it's not about Brother Brian saying this. It's just I've been blessed and been able to afford the time to do this. But we all must prove all things, as I mentioned to you, Pastor Dowell, the first time I walked with you on the land. And we can get into that later. So, all right. So if we got a couple more minutes. Let me go through a couple more definitions that I think you'll want to look up that are rather important to understand. Okay, jurisdiction. Because remember, the very first thing I read here was the first statement of what? The 14th Amendment, right? So in that 14th Amendment, which was the point of the conversation today, was exposing this thing that we all believe that set us free. Well, actually set a portion of us free, but then entrapped all of us into a new private status called the U.S. citizen. Prior to that, it was called the American national, or each state was a sovereign state. So when these people came over here and they declared freedom and they said, hey, we're all sovereign states and we're a republic, and we authorize this thing called a government to act in one capacity to protect us. And that's all it was. It wasn't to tax, fine, do anything. It was literally just to call up militias and to protect us. Okay? They bankrupted it by design, led by those families and those names that I mentioned, and they set this whole thing up through debt, which is, right, it's an abomination to the Most High Yah, and they've usurped all these nations, sovereign states, sovereign people. You look across the world today, all these nations, Greece, they're trying to get Syria and Iran, but they ain't going to get them. And they've gotten everybody else around that whole region. They've done it by one mechanism. It's called debt. Debt, right? They've offered them money, and then they've jacked up and infiltrated and raised the inflation and the amount or the value of the currency, so where that then they couldn't make the interest payments. No different than America today. Pastor Dowell, I got an interesting point here. If I could find my notes, and I probably can't. But I did make a note that as in 2012, I believe the Federal Reserve, pardon me, I can't find it, but the Federal Reserve, I think, per their own records, made like $78 billion in revenue. So we have this thing called the Federal Reserve, a bank that's owned by those families I mentioned, right? And they're all Khazar Jews from descendants of Ashkenaz that blended with Esau, probably. I don't know. Pastor Dowell can be the authority on that. But what they've done is they've enslaved pretty much the entire world, and they've put us in a Roman colony under a new feudal system, and they've decorated it just like they did the Christmas tree with all these low-hanging fruits and football games and sports and entertainment and Hollywood and movies and cars and loans. Damn, I can go get a new Escalade. Wow. I can go buy a house that I really couldn't even afford to build or don't even know how to build. But they've used all these mechanisms, and that's exactly what I said in the beginning. Let's see, who was it? It was, where's my quote page? By one of the early Roman emperors of how they would, actually Justinian, that they would keep everybody pacified with stuff, that they would make it so complex. And here's another quote, right? This was Marie Antoinette, another Edomite, a descendant, a bloodline of those 13 families that I mentioned that ruled over France. She said, feed them cake. No different than the Roman emperors would say, right? Feed them to the lions so that everyone would give their thumb up or thumb down. No different. It's no different in this country that we live in. They feed us shit. They feed us entertainment, sports, food, movies, and basically just MK Ultra mind control things. So, Pastor Dowell, I think I'll cede on that. I think that's a pretty good, definitely a lot of information there. And like I said, brothers and sisters, if we can roll this out and just specific topics at the end, it'll make a whole lot more sense. But it's far deeper than the 14th Amendment and what we think is what it is. So, shalom.
All right, bless you, Brother Brian. Appreciate you being on here with us tonight. I tell you what, we're going to take a break here just for a second, and I'll be right back here to take your phone calls. Guest calling number 310-982-4226. You'll be on the Straitway Truth Radio broadcast with yours truly, Pastor Charles Dowell Jr.
Children know his name.
And he shall be called Advocate, Lamb of God, the resurrection and the life, Shepherd and Bishop of souls, Judge, Lord of lords, Man of sorrows, Head of the church, Master, faithful and true witness, Rock, High Priest, the door, living water, Bread of life, Rose of Sharon, Alpha and Omega, True Vine, Messiah, Teacher, Holy One, Mediator, the beloved branch, Carpenter, Good Shepherd, Light of the world, Image of the invisible God, the Word, Chief Cornerstone, Savior, Servant, Author and Finisher of our faith, the Almighty, Everlasting Father, Shiloh, Lion of the tribe of Judah, I am, King of Kings, Prince of Peace, Bridegroom, Only Begotten Son, Wonderful Counselor, Emmanuel, Son of Man, Dayspring, the Amen, King of the Jews, Prophet, Redeemer, Anchor, Bright Morning Star, the way, the truth, and the life, Jesus Christ.
Pastor Dowell. Straitway Truth. Keep teaching. Keep preaching. Keep out preaching. Hallelujah.
Straitway Truth